Hi everyone, welcome back to Journeying with Janay. I'm Janay. As you can see today, we have a guest. Today's episode is entitled Coping with Grief. And this episode came about because over the past 2 years, I have taken some tremendous losses back to back. And it was really hard for me to cope at first because I wasn't in therapy. And then once I started going to therapy, I started getting the tools to cope. But just being honest, I'm still healing. And so today I wanted to share my story and give you some of the ways that I am healing and through my healing process. But I was like, I can't do this by myself. I need someone else to come in. And I was like, I want a therapist. And I end up finding a therapist that's actually my cousin, and she's like, her bio is gold. So I'm about to introduce her right now and read her bio. So this is Dr. Tracy L. Reed. Dr. Tracy L. Reed, PhD, is a licensed professional counselor and clinical supervisor from Thibodaux, Louisiana. She is the owner of Life Keys Wellness, LLC in Thibodaux, and co-owner of Louisiana Counseling and Training Consultants, LLC in Gretna, Louisiana. Dr. Reed attended undergrad at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and obtained a BA in psychology and sociology in 2002. She then returned to her hometown and obtained a master's degree in psychological counseling from Nicholls State University in 2004. In 2015, Dr. Reed completed a PhD in higher education and research with a specialization in student affairs administration at LSU. Go Tigers!
Go Tigers.
Dr. Reed's counseling practice focuses on helping clients improve their overall mental health and wellness by exploring emotional recovery, generational, ancestral trauma, and integrated life coaching. Dr. Reed has over 20 years of mental health counseling experience and is most passionate about helping others attain personal and collective healing, mind, body, and spirit. So everyone, please welcome Dr. Reed and my
Hi.
cousin. So thank you so much for accepting
Hi.
the
Hi,
invitation.
Janay. Hi. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm so happy to have you here. We found out we was cousins because we were actually going to do this episode. My brother was like, I have someone that I think he could do the episode with you. And I'm like, oh, we're actually cousins.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yes.
Yes. And I was thinking the same thing, like what? Like I didn't even know Norman had a little sister. Like it's so crazy. Like we didn't even know we was cousins. And, it turns out like what a great way for us to even be connected through healing, in your healing journey. So I totally appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and, share with you and those that are watching your platform, just some few tips, conversation about our topic for today.
Yes, ma'am. And we're excited to have you. Like I said, and I always tell everybody on my episodes, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a clinical expert. I'm just taking you on my journey as we turn pain to purpose,
Yeah.
taking all the painful things in my life. And like, I didn't just go through this for myself, it is for somebody else.
Yeah.
So we're going to help you all today. And especially this episode really came about, one, from my grief, but two, the whole world just seems like they're grieving because coronavirus,
Yeah.
pandemic, the racial injustice, it's a
Right.
lot. And then people are grieving other things. So I want to tell you all a little bit about my grief that I experienced, which would be today's Janay fact. So in June of 2018, I lost my paternal grandfather. And then in December of 2018, I lost my paternal grandmother. So that was 6 months apart. They passed. And then
Wow.
I experienced a breakup like 2 weeks later, which we'll get into a little while. I didn't know that even a breakup was a
Big
thing to
loss.
grieve. Right. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
until I went to therapy. And then 9 months later, I lost my maternal grandmother. So the last 2 years of my life have
Oh
been
my
like
gosh.
string right has girls been loss after loss, and then it was traumatic because they were on hospice, so it was just like something
Right.
that just felt like it was never ending. And I've been told maybe you should try therapy. And I'm just like, I don't know, because of the stigma, of course, in our community. And then after all of that loss, and I was just sitting there and I'm like, you know what? I need to go to therapy. And
Yeah.
I know the key factor of me really not losing it after all those losses and then having another major loss with my maternal grandmother about 9 months later was I had already had about 6 months of therapy. So I'd already kind of gained some tools to help.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So I
Right.
started to
So
get.
even in that short time of 6 months, you were able to see some changes, some positive growth from your time in therapy, right? So
Right. It
yeah, that's
wasn't,
good.
yeah, it was like the first two losses like really weighed on me, but I was
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe I can still make it. Then the breakup, and I was like, okay, this is a lot. So
Right. Okay, it's piling it on, right?
right,
Okay.
I'm like, okay, God, what you trying to
Yeah.
put me through now?
Yeah.
But seriously, going to therapy and just talking about all of those things, finding out that a breakup is a loss and that's something that you grieve. So that's kind of where I want to start today. If you wouldn't mind, Dr. Tracy, telling us just a little bit about grief, maybe explaining it for those who don't know, and explain that grief is not just a death of a person. It could be, like I said, for me, a loss of a relationship, or even now people who's losing events. They can't graduate or walk across the stage, or their weddings are postponed, or baby
Sure.
showers. So can you talk a little bit about that and explain how that's grief too, and that their grief, they have every right to grieve just as if they lost someone?
Sure. So, I really like to kind of break things down. Even when I work with my clients, I'm really try not to, speak in kind of like, um psychological speak, if you will, because I feel like being able to kind of relate to people kind of where they are and really almost kind of like make it real, make it resonate, make it relatable to where people are, right? So I would just describe grief as, the feelings of the feelings and emotions, right? Maybe the actions and behaviors that you would experience following a loss, right? And so when we think about it in that way, that definitely disqualifies it as only being about death, but actually being about the loss of anything that you held dear to you, that you've held important to you. Even if it was a part of your life in some way, shape, or form, even if it wasn't particularly a part of your life, but it was the involved in or it affects someone that you're close to, even in that way, you know what I'm saying? It can affect you. So again, feelings and emotions, actions and behaviors that show up as a result of loss. So that can be a death, that can be the loss of a job, the loss of a career, the loss of a relationship, that could be the loss of anything, the loss of a home, the loss of your car, like whatever the experience is.
Right.
If you feel like, I'm hurting, I'm having these emotions, these feelings, or I'm trying to isolate and disregard and not pay attention and ignore these feelings, right, because they're uncomfortable for me, then you are experiencing grief, right? And so when we think about the fact that it could be as a result of losing anything, it's also important for us to know that just like each one of us are individuals on separate journeys, right? We have different personalities. We experience this life in a different way. That means that everyone experiences grief in their own way. So the way that I process it, or that it comes out for me with this particular loss at this particular time, may be totally and completely different for me at another time in my life, as well as totally and completely different from what it looks like for another person. So, knowing and understanding that your process of grief is just that, your process. And, you know, you don't have to feel like, or at least you shouldn't be made to feel like, you know, you should be over this by now, or, you know, you're taking too long to deal with this, or are you still upset about this? You know, I often tell people that, you know, that's a sign that we're struggling with self-compassion, right? Because who would really say, you know, to a kid, if you will, right? Or who would really say to any other person, you know, that they really loved and cared about, that was hurting, who would really say to that person, you should be over that by now, right? It's like we give that care and concern to someone else, but then to ourselves, we're like, maybe I shouldn't still be crying about this. I shouldn't still be thinking about this, or I shouldn't want to talk about this, or I shouldn't need to talk about this. So I think definitely, you know, grief is something that we all deal with. And a lot of times grief is a traumatic experience, you know, depending on the circumstances that surround it. And especially depending on who we are, each individual person, you know, what family you come from, you know, all of these things are built into how we experience grief, especially, you know, as Black.
We have a buffering moment.
That, you know, it may look different, and that's okay.
Okay, you buffered a little bit. You stopped at especially at Black people, and then we lost connection.
Okay. Okay.
But we're back. So just
you're back. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you still hear and see me? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, you know, especially as Black people, I think, you know, we have these kind of nuances about, you know, seeking help and talking about our feelings and our emotions, and, you know, creating this picture of strength, right? In terms of being able to experience things. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's needed. You know, sometimes people just need to hear, like, it is okay. Like, it doesn't mean you're crazy if you seek help. You know, if you go to see a counselor, if you talk to a life coach, if you go and, you know, seek pastoral counseling, or if you go and talk to your girls and, you know, say, you know, I need some support. Can y'all, you know, I need a girls' night. I need, you know, a supportive circle of friends, you know, who really love me and care about me, who won't judge me for being vulnerable, and I can really express how I'm feeling instead of keeping everything all bottled up inside. And then grief turns into depression, anxiety, right? Substance abuse, you know, eating disorders, and or other sickness and disease, you know, medical, physical issues. So ulcers, migraines, you know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of issues that we experience, mind, body, and spirit, or as are come from a result of us not being willing to open up and really acknowledge the emotions we feel, and really dig deeper for that healing, because it's uncomfortable, because, you know, because as a people, because of our experiences, we've had to survive like that. We've had to learn to suck it up and, you know, take it to the chin, and, you know, don't worry about it, and don't let it get you, you know, and you got to shake it off, and you got to keep on moving, and, you know, and we have all of these experiences, like, you know, racial injustice, right? And so how many names of Black people, you know, do we see and we experience, and we watch these videos, and it's over and over, and it's over and over. And it's like, at some point, it desensitizes us to actually processing our grief, right? So, you know, I'm glad, you know, not to ramble, but I'm glad that we're having this conversation, so that people can understand it's okay to still be hurting. It's okay if you need a safe space to just be able to talk about it with no judgment, You know what I'm saying? Without people thinking that you're crazy, but even to just be able to release that emotion and say, yes, I'm still hurting from this loss. Yes, I'm having a hard time with this, right? Yes, I need to give myself some love and some compassion and really be able to own my own issues, right? And work through those. And that is what self-healing and healing from loss is really all about. So, yeah, great topic. I'm here for all the questions. I'll flow with you however you want it to be. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. So,
girl,
yes.
me too. But like you said, breaking it down, because you touched on, as you were saying some things, a lot of things were sparking in my head because you touched on a lot of different things, but all of them needed to be said. So I kind of want to unpack them a little bit. And the first thing that I'll definitely want to unpack is how you said grief is your own process, just as in our own journeys. We journey different. We have different things. Everyone grieves differently. And so I don't, for the life of me, and it's extremely insensitive how you said, people, you should be over it now. And I heard a quote that says grief comes in waves. And I know for me, that has definitely happened. It's like some days I can be good. It doesn't bother me. But then all of a sudden I find myself crying. I'm like, what am I crying for? But that's the grief coming in waves.
Right.
And especially, we kind of touched a little bit on our conversation on the phone about grief coupled with religion. And for most of my viewers, they know I'm a PK, so they automatically think that, because people would automatically think on the outside looking in, oh, since you a pastor's daughter and you close to God, just pray about it and pray your way through the grief, and you need anything else, or the grief should be easier for you because your dad's a pastor, or because he was a pastor and he lost his parents, that your grief should be easier. But in all actuality, it's really not. Thankfully, we do have God for strength. We do know that we can pray. But as you said on our phone conversation, something else in your healing basket.
Yes.
And when you said that, it was like, I love that term, basket, because for me, did an episode a few weeks back about crisis of faith. And for a while, when I had that crisis of faith, I couldn't pray. But that was the only thing I had in my healing basket at that time. So lost. I felt crazy. I didn't know where to go and who to turn to. And like you said, it spins into the depression, the anxiety, just being honest, the anger, the frustration. And you end up taking that out on those closest to you. And I find that happens a lot in grief. We're grieving, but we have no outlet to talk about it, and we're trying to cope with different vices, whether it be alcohol or drugs, or some people it's sex, it's relationships, whatever it is. We're trying to find vices to cope, because we feel we're going to be judged if we actually sit down and talk to someone, whether it be a therapist or a friend, to say, hey, I'm struggling. So just to talk about how it's okay for you to grieve in your own time. I don't care if the person's been gone 6 months, 6 days, or 6 years. You still lost someone for the rest of your life. And it's okay to have those feelings and feel them as long as you need to. And it's not something that you just need to go pray about and pray through, but actually seek out help and talk to someone.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, again, it's important to understand who you are as a person and what works for you, right? Exactly. Because when you understand who you are as a person and what works for you, then, someone saying or expecting that you should be over it right now, that hits different. It's like it falls off, because it's like, I know what I need and what, how I need to process for myself, right?
Right.
In some cultures, particularly traditional African spiritual, cultures, they honor ancestors forever, right?
Right.
So you think about that idea, right? There's never an idea of you're over it. Right? It's rather, yes, I have to, deal with the emotions of sadness that might come up because I miss them in this earth realm. But spiritually, I know that their presence, their energy, it remains with me, right? That's why you can still, look at a picture of them, or you can still, go to their home, or, see, something that reminds you of them. And it's like you feel their energy, because that it still remains, right? And so again, knowing who you are and what works for you helps you to develop and flow with your process of grief in a way that is not resistant to what works for you and what other people think it should look like. So I encourage people to really spend time tuning in to what they feel feels good for them, for their spirit, right? Spend time thinking about that. Now, of course, you're going to have moments of sadness. You're going to have moments of, I'll say this. Anyone can Google it. If you take a moment and Google the stages of grief, which I'm sure, you have, Janay.
Yeah.
There's typically some signs. Some people say that there are 5 stages. Some people say that there are 7 stages. The idea is grief happens kind of like in cycles, like kind of like initially you might be angry about it. Then you might go into sadness about it. And then after that, you might, be in disbelief. You might be trying to like bargain and see, you know what I'm saying? And then you might go back to being sad about it. It happens in waves, just like you said, right? That's exactly what that means, because some days I might be cool. Some days I might be not feeling good. When it comes close to anniversaries and things like that, I might be in a feeling different. But if you learn to honor what feels good for you,
right,
and your process, then you can move through those waves, in a more healthy way, cope with those waves in a healthier way that doesn't end up in a downward spiral of depression, but rather some moments of sadness, but I'm able to pull myself, together and push forward. So.
right. And having that confidence, like you said, to own your process, own and know who you are. First, have that knowing of yourself to say,
right.
Hey, I know I need X, Y, and Z to be able to get through this and to be able to process, but also owning that process and saying, you know what, you don't have to understand my process, and that's fine with me. But I'm going to own my process. I'm going to use my support system. And for me, that, like I said, that was therapy. That was family. That was journaling. I use what works for me to get me to the point of healing that I am now.
Right. Even if that means something that traditionally I would say, oh my God, you're doing the most. That doesn't work. Oh, yoga. Oh my God, it's not that serious. Or, oh, deep breathing, meditation. Oh, please, And I think that a lot of people traditionally, we especially, and I'm just gonna say, Black Christian women, we get locked in this one frame of mind of doing things, right? And we're not always the most open to trying something different without feeling like other people are going to have a problem if we try something different, or without feeling like I want to try it, but I don't think it's going to work. So just being open to trying other resources, other things. And that might look like, you said, counseling, that might look like, excuse me, attending, a women's group, so like a ladies support group, or that might look like, taking a day to say, I'm gonna be not on social media today, and I'm gonna kind of like spend my extra time journaling. It could be anything. It just depends.
Yeah, having a self-care day. And I find, like you said, as Black women, one, sometimes we don't want to try it for fear of being judged or not knowing if it's going to work. But I feel it's also important, which is why I try to always use my platform for mental and emotional health, that once we try it and we see it works, don't just keep it to ourselves. Share it with your fellow, with your sisters, with your brothers. Share it, because that will in turn make them more comfortable to go. Because the reason, honestly, why I started going to therapy is I will watch The Breakfast Club, and Charlamagne the God will talk about his process with therapy and how it works. Taraji P. Henson was on and talking about therapy and her mental health organization. I'm like, okay, if the people that I kind of look up to and respect, and I was like, if they can go and they can talk about it and encourage me to go, now that I am going, I need to start talking about it so it can encourage others to go so they don't feel alone.
Yeah, and let other people know, like, you know, I had the same thought that y'all had. Like,
Right.
man, I'ma just pray about it. You know, that's all I need, you know, and what do you do when that's not working? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you do when you feel like, okay, it might be working a little bit, but what is wrong with me adding something else to my healing handbasket, you know? So I always say that. I got that term from my best friend. Shout out to Simone Harris, who is an emotional intelligence therapist who, I mean, has helped me tremendously with learning about emotional intelligence. But that is where that idea comes from, you know, being able to have something else in your basket that helps you to deal with the emotions besides just and only prayer, you know, and fellowship, you know, at church. Because I mean, when you think about it, you know, how many other things do we use and utilize multiple resources? You know what I'm saying? And you think about it, like I'm saying right now, like I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my phone is saying I got 20% left, right? And I'm thinking, oh, no worries. I'm just going to locate my other charger. Like, I have multiple chargers, right? Like, we use multiple resources for things all the time. Like, right? We don't just use one thing for virtually anything. You know, we have multiple things that we use to help us for different things. So I think, you know, counseling is just one of those additional things in addition to prayer and, you know, fellowship and all that stuff that you can use to really help you deal with the feelings of emotion and hurt and pain that come from the loss and the grief of someone that you love, you know, someone that you're connected to.
Right. And another one of the things that I wanted to unpack that you said, which we touched on a little bit, is with grief being in different forms and with the pandemic, a lot of people have lost those major life events. Graduating from high school has been changed. Graduating from college, most colleges didn't even have a ceremony. It was just something online. It was everything was in virtual. Or those people who were getting married and who have spent a lot of money and planning and everything like that. So it's like you miss out on those events. And I've seen some people who's like, I kind of feel guilty for grieving because in the time of the pandemic and so many people losing loved ones to coronavirus, I haven't lost a loved one to coronavirus. So they was like, I've heard a lot of people say they kind of feel guilty for grieving that event that they lost because they haven't physically lost a person. But I'm like, it's okay, because weddings, baby showers, graduations, it is okay to grieve that. So you shouldn't feel guilty. So if you want to touch a little bit on that, touch a little bit on about how it's okay and not to feel guilty, because that grief is just as valid as
And I would even say, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. And I would even say, you know, even being able to examine the feeling of guilt, right? I feel guilty because what? Because of something that was hurtful and painful for you, right? Even that feeling of guilt is a self-judgment that we take on that is unhealthy, right? So again, knowing that no one should be making you feel a feeling of guilt. If you're feeling a feeling of guilt, that shows that you are judging yourself. And if I'm judging myself, that is the opposite of loving myself. So you see how, like, really digging into the feelings that I'm feeling helped me to see, man, if I have a feeling that me grieving in the way that I'm grieving is offensive to other people, then I need to be offering myself a little bit more self-compassion, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how it affects other people, because this is how I feel, right? So to anyone, again, that's why I redefine, the definition of grief. It's not just sadness about a death, right? Sadness about a loss. So whether you lost, the event that you were going to share with your friends. I have colleagues who have lost, had their weddings planned for months, years, and they lost that event. Like, that is sad. They think about being able to share that special day, that special event, we got the graduates, those parties, all of those things that they were looking up to, that they were looking forward to. Like, it makes perfect sense that they would be grieving. Even kids who were grieving the end of school, not even being able to properly get sent off for the summer. Even people sometimes are like, man, we've been out of work for a while. Like, I ain't gonna lie, I kind of miss work, right? We've all experienced a shift in the way we are experiencing things. And so it's a loss for a lot of us, and even more for those who've actually lost a loved one as a result, of the virus. And so for anyone, I would say whatever you're grieving, whether it's the loss of a person, whether it's the loss of an event, whether it's the loss of a relationship, whether it's the loss of a job, whatever it is, it's okay for you to feel how you're feeling. And if you feel that you have to make excuses about it, or you're feeling ashamed of it, or you're feeling in any way like you're doing something wrong for grieving, I assure you, you are not. And that is something that you need to take a look at, because you need to offer yourself a little bit more self-compassion, self-love, and allow yourself to grieve and open up and release those feelings in a healthy and beneficial way. If you're unsure about how to do that, I would say reach out to get support from someone that has gone through that experience, from a licensed behavioral health professional, a life coach, a pastor, someone that can give you a safe space to not judge you, and to really be able to express the feelings that you're feeling, and get that out, so you're not holding it in. And I would say that that's kind of the best advice that I would have for anyone that is experiencing grief from loss. Doing those things before it gets to, now I'm so depressed that I'm not getting out of bed. Before it gets to, now I'm so depressed that, I'm feeling suicidal. Before it gets to, now I'm so depressed that, I'm isolating myself from friends, family, everything. Open up, be willing to open up and seek help, so that you can release some of those feelings and emotions before it turns into something even more unhealthy.
Yeah, and two things that I want to say when you were talking. One is, I find a lot of us going back to grief of relationships, as a relationship end, depending on how it ended, we want to be so prideful, or oh, that didn't bother me and this didn't. But when you actually saying, okay, this is somebody that, especially people who've been in divorce, this is somebody that went from talking to every day, multiple times a day, to now we have no connection at all. So being honest and open enough to put that pride aside and let those walls down, and actually grieve and deal with what you need to grieve and deal with. And it brings me to the next point that I wanted to talk about. And I think you called it when we were on the phone, that your body keeping the number of the
score.
Score. Because for me, when I was grieving, I'm thinking, okay, I kind of moved past it, because kind of a fear of wanting to be judged, not trying to grieve for too long. And I didn't notice, my grandmother died on the 27th of December. We buried her on the 5th of January. So for 6 months, from the 27th of that month to the 5th of the next month, I did not sleep. Went a solid week without sleeping. And I never paid attention to it until I started going to therapy. And the week after the 5th, I went, and the therapist was asking, how's everything going? And I'm like, this past week I haven't slept. And he was like, And so of course, he started to ask me those questions to make me think so I can dig deeper. In the first session, it didn't dawn on me. And then once that next month rolled around, and that 27th to the 5th, and I'm like, I didn't sleep the same time during these same dates last month. And so I went to therapy, and I'm like, I think I'm not sleeping because that's the time from my grandmother passing to us burying her. And he didn't called it like what you did, but he said it's because those dates, your body remembers those dates and how you felt then. And so
Right.
that you haven't
Right.
fully dealt with it, your body is trying to make you deal with it. So I want to talk about that a little bit, how kind of not dealing with it properly will cause your body to react in different ways, whether it's not sleeping, or some people it's weight loss or weight gain or things of that nature.
Right. Right. Well, so, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you have a lot of viewers, who are into like psychology and things like that. But, it's really kind of like the science of trauma, right? So when we say that word trauma, we're talking about any event that really kind of like shifts you, that's traumatic. Well, any event that really kind of makes a mark on your psyche and experience, you know what I'm saying? Like it really shakes you. And we think, okay, this experience happened to me, and it was 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was 10 years ago, and I'm just moving on and I'm over it, and that's it, right? But when in actuality, what's happening is your body has a mark on it now, like inside, almost like your energetic signature really remembers this traumatic event, right? That's why things like, I got in a car accident 10 years ago at this red light, and then 10 years later I'm passing by this red light, and all of a sudden, like, I'm feeling like, my heart's racing, and I'm like, it's like your body is remembering, right? So that's just a little bit, a short synopsis of the idea of your body holding the traumas, right? So if you think about it like that, it's important for you to be able to pay attention to the signs and the signals that your body is giving you when things come up. So when things come up, if I feel emotional, if I feel like, oh my God, this is hard for me, that is a signal and a clue for you. Your body, your emotions telling you, hello, this is a light bulb. This is something that we haven't healed from. This is something, that we need to slow down and pause and look at. But because of the culture we live in, we're moving, right? We're on the go. We're in the rat race. We're moving fast. We don't have time for that. We got to do this gig. We got to hustle this. We got to make this money. We got to do this. We don't sleep. We got, we get on the move. And so because of that, and also because of the fact that, emotions are uncomfortable. It's the idea of bringing up something that is hard for you to talk about. So, of course, it's going to be uncomfortable. So our natural inclination is to avoid it. Don't confront it. Like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to bring that up. That's going to cause a conflict. That's going to make someone angry. That's going to make me sad. I'm scared to say that. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, we're in that space rather than being open about, this is how I feel. This hurt me. When this happened, this is what came up for me. I felt humiliated. I felt angry. I felt frustrated. I felt pain and hurt. I felt, but we don't want to say that because, we got to be all of like, feelings, we got to be savages, like that's the culture, right? That's the culture, to be more savage-like than more healing and nurturing and being honest about how I feel within, so I can really work through these issues from the root, instead of just saying that don't bother me when really deep down inside you're suffering. You're still suffering.
I just had that conversation with a friend of mine, and we were saying how God made us to be emotional beings and want us to feel things, but because of society, it's just, especially with men, it's like the toxic masculinity of a man,
Right.
don't cry and all of this. So really, God made us this way, made our brains this way, made our hearts to feel the compassion and empathy and sympathy. But because we want to be more in line with society, we try
Right.
to turn our brains and our emotions off, which
That's it.
makes no sense at
Right.
all. And then, like
Right.
you said, then that's when it catches up with us. When
Right.
why are so many
Right.
people so angry? Why are so many people so violent?
Yes.
It's because they're denied themselves emotions, trying to keep up with society instead of just trying to be like God made us, the emotional human beings that we are.
Right. And so let's apply that same concept to grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. We're emotional beings, right? We're grieving the loss of something that we felt connected to, of something that made us feel good, of something that was important to us, or something that was a part of our experience, right? And here's some idea saying, you shouldn't be experiencing that, you need to get over it, you need to not grieve like that, or you must do it like this, or if you don't do it in this way, then it doesn't mean the same, right? And what do? Rather than continuing to be the nurturing people that we are, we succumb to the system,
Yes.
right? To the matrix,
Mm-hmm.
and we do what is not natural for us.
Yes.
Turn off the feelings, stuff down your emotions, hurry up and get through it, right? Now we're so uncomfortable. We're not grieving. We don't want to look at pictures. We don't want to listen to stories. You know what I'm saying? Now when the anniversary comes up, now it's not a healthy, it's not a healthy way to deal with the loss. Now it's turned into substance abuse, or, now it's turned into, I'm taking my emotions and I'm turning mean and I'm turning, surly, and now I'm directing that at my partner or my spouse or my children, and I'm not really literally processing it because I'm not tuned into what I really need for me. What God has told me is the way that will work for me to process it. So, yeah, that's, it's hard. It's hard because we, as people, right, it's not our faults that we are like this. It's not our faults, right? It's the system, right? It's the way we've been programmed. And that's why in my practice, I like to say that I help people look at generational ancestral patterns, like your family of origin, like where you come from, how y'all do things in y'all family, like all of that, it makes up a part of who you are as a person. Right. But if all of that, a lot of that is grounded and rooted in a system that was not built for us, then that means that we're probably have a lot of things that we do in there that are not loving and kind and healthy and beneficial for us. So as people, we will start to wake up and we start to see that it's our responsibility to be honest about how we're feeling, so we can look at that and start healing some of that stuff and saying, no, it is okay for men to cry in a relationship. No, it is okay for you to be able to express to that brother or to be able to express to that sister. Your actions in the relationship or in the way it ended hurt me.
Yes.
And I don't appreciate the way you're treating me, Right. But I can still express that to you and move forward, right? Dealing with the loss. I don't have to keep on going back. So it's all kinds of different entanglements in there, if you will. But at the end of the day, that's it. It all leads back to being able to be connected enough to yourself.
Yeah.
To know what works for you, your process of grief, whatever feels good to you. You know what I'm saying? So if it feels good for you to remember your grandmother while you're sitting down in prayer and meditation, or you sitting down and you're writing your journal, and you want to light a candle, you know what I'm saying? And you want to, sing your grandmother's favorite, song on Sunday morning. Like, that's your way to honor your grandmother. If that makes your spirit feels good, then that is your grief process. But you're not going to know what really works for you if you don't slow down enough to allow yourself to tune into what works for you. And so, again, I think the pandemic has been devastating for a lot of us.
Right.
But also it's been enlightening, right? For a lot of people, it's shined a light on a lot of the things that we need to work on looking at, that we've been glossing over, right? Yeah. A lot of people, have maybe not even had time to situate their grief or acknowledge their grief because, we've been living in the rat race. All before the pandemic, it was go, 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 go. Now, and then the world stops. And then I see just how much stuff I've been ignoring, and I need to find a healthier way to deal with that. And processing that grief, working with the therapist, talking about it, all of those things are definitely things I would recommend to anyone.
Yes, and another thing that came up for me in my grieving process was I found when celebrities passed away that we were also connected to, like Kobe Bryant. It brought up my own grief, even though, of course, we didn't know him.
Right.
Seen him from playing basketball for 20 years, or like we just recently lost Naya Rivera. It seems like when those big losses happen, it sometimes forces us to deal with our own grief, right, because the whole world is grieving at once. And so it's like, wow, it's in your face. So whether you wanted to deal with your own grief or not, it's coming back up.
Yeah. And, even then, sometimes people still don't make those connections, and see like, oh my God, like, I am too crying about Kobe Bryant. Yeah. And I ain't cried like that in forever. And it's just like, because you probably got some other things under there that you haven't processed, but Kobe Bryant just, so happened to bring it out. So yeah, that happens sometimes. But I think that it also helps you to see just how much people avoid dealing with those types of feelings and emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the last type of grief that I want to talk about, and I saved it for last because I knew it was going to be, I wanted to go a little deeper into it. Us being Black women and grieving our safety for us, for the men in our lives, for our children. Just like a quick little story, and I actually shared this with my therapist in our last session. My mom and I were in the store, and this family, they were like, you can fill the little bags up with candy, and you go pay for them and you eat them. Mm-hmm. That's it. This family kept going back, filling up the bag. They would eat them. They hadn't paid for them yet, and kept going back and forth. And my mom and I looked at each other and we were like, I know my nieces couldn't do that, because that can possibly turn into a life or death situation, because the police would be called and a whole thing would happen. And so I've been finding myself more so lately grieving kind of like the loss of us being able to have full freedom, or being able, like your children, especially young men, having to have that talk with your children, whether they're boys or girls, but especially boys, about, okay, once you get to this certain age, you're cute from birth to about 8, 9, but once you start to grow taller and your voice gets deeper and all of that, now you almost like you are a threat now. So having to grieve, like you said at the beginning, it's like, how many more names? And so sometimes we become numb to it, which we shouldn't, but it's just like, I said to myself, if I really have to sit here and feel these feelings every time this happens, I feel like I would just unravel and be a complete mess.
Right.
And so for those, the thing that I want to ask you, Dr. Tracy, is for those parents, especially, who's having to have these conversations and kind of seeing their children's innocence leaving, and having to grieve that, what advice would you give them?
That's a great question. I would encourage parents to process how they are feeling first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really be able to tune in, right? And identify, be honest and vulnerable and say how they are feeling, what is coming up for you, right? So if I sit down and I think about, the thought that my little nephew, you know what I'm saying? He's just a little brown baby, he's just a little brown boy, like it brings tears, I have to be able to admit that brings fear to me, right? Rather than once I can admit that brings fear to me, now I'm sharing my experience with my children in a way that is not like, you're just a mom and you're just worried about nothing and you're putting your fear onto me. It's like, no, I am sharing with you. This is what comes up for me. This is how I feel when I think about this, right? How do you feel, right? And so it depends on how old your kid is, right? If your kids are not old enough to understand or to have that talk, you know what I'm saying? Then I would say, again, processing your own feelings and emotions, because they'll follow your lead, right? Exactly. If your kids are old enough to have these conversations, I would say you're processing yours first, and then you're opening up and having that conversations with the kids, right? These kids know what's going on. Having a conversation with them and being honest about the fact that, this is unfortunate, but this doesn't mean that we have to operate in fear, right? We're gonna do everything that we need to do to stay safe. And then we're going to, believe that we are safe and protected. And, we're gonna, because you don't want the conversation to turn into now, you're afraid now every time the kid try to go out, you're triggered. Like you don't want to perpetuate the energy of fear, but you want to, again, lead with your emotions, lead with being honest about how you're feeling. It makes for a much gentler, much more open conversation than acting like it's not bothering you, acting like nothing's happening, or acting like, you know what I'm saying, it's not a conversation that needs to be had, like they just gonna get it, on their own. So it's hard, it's tough. I would also say one thing that is helpful is to know that it doesn't matter how many more names there are. The collective energy is the same, right?
Right.
So really, you don't really have to watch every new video. You don't really have to subject yourself to the story of every new name. You know what I'm saying? You gotta, again, understand and know what works for you, because if that's affecting you, right? If watching the videos and being on social media and commenting on every post and all of that stuff is making you more anxious, more worried, then again, you have to know yourself and know that that's not something that's healthy or working for you. So you need to dial back in other ways as well.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And just being completely transparent, that is actually something that I'm working on right now in therapy, is to not live in fear. Of course, awareness, to have knowing. Of course, I don't have children yet, but that has always been my thing. Like, having to grieve that part and, grieve those things that we as a community lose just because of our skin color. And I just feel right now, coupled with the pandemic, coupled with the injustice and the civil unrest, it's a lot. And so in closing, I just, for me, want to encourage anyone who's going through any grief, whether it be a loss of a loved one, a loss of a relationship, a loss of an event, home, job, the loss of your children's innocence because of racial injustice, I definitely encourage you to please seek the necessary help. And I'm pretty sure you've heard me, you've heard Dr. Tracy say it over and over again, but it is important, so it is worth being said multiple times to seek that necessary help, so that you're not looking 5 years down the road and saying, I've made mistakes because I was in a downward spiral from grief, or I could have done things differently, but I couldn't even deal with my own grief at the time. And for those who are going through it and going through the healing process, I'm a firm believer that the healing process from grief is kind of like a never-ending process, because like she said, you go through the cycles and it comes in waves, and some things trigger you some days that wouldn't trigger you others. But anybody who's in the process, I would encourage you and just say, it's your process, it's your journey. Take your journey. Time. I have done that for myself. I had to take my time. I had to do what worked for me. And even still with my healing process, actually sitting right here, one thing that's comforting for me is having things. So sitting right here on the floor, I actually have a ceramic cat from my grandmother that she had from like the 1970s.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, antique. I love antique.
And it was funny because like I said, I was over there all the time. And when I was a little girl, I used to always say, Mama, when you die, I want that cat. And I didn't really think she remembered until probably about 4.5, 5 months before her death. They were cleaning some stuff and she gave it to my dad, and she said, my girl said whenever I die, she want this cat. She said, but I want her to have it. She remembers. She said, but I want her to have it now, so I know that she has it. And so it actually sits right in my bedroom, so it's in my eye view, so I can see. And so from my other grandmother, I have a Bible, like a big holy one of those, if you like, you know what I'm talking about, that's where all the information is. You stick everything. And that Bible is from like the 1930s. So I have something from each of them that is comforting to me, and that I know in the Bible, my grandmother's writing is in there, so I can go back and look at have things in there. Encourage people, whatever works for you, whatever works for you. Right, that you can find that's comforting, that will bring joy. Or even for me with my my grandfather, when I was sick a lot and had health issues and I wasn't able to go to school right away, he would always ask my dad, Norman, I hope my girl gonna be able to go to college. I know she always wanted to go. And he actually died a month before I was accepted.
Wow. Oh, Ashe.
Yes. So it was that's always been so emotional for me, because I'm like, he's not here to see it, but like you said, I know that presence is here.
Yeah, you know, you feel that energy. You feel his presence. Yeah. And I mean, like, I totally feel you, you know, on the antiques or, you know, or anything, you know, that resonates with you. You know, like I have, you know, in my spaces, I have an ancestor altar, like, you know, my loved ones that have passed on, I have pictures, I have mementos, you know, and when I'm doing my meditation, my prayer, you know, daily, you know, whatever, whenever I feel like I need to do it, you know, and I can just light a candle and sit and, you know, allow their presence, you know, their wisdom to guide me on whatever issue. And that works for me. That makes me feel supported. That makes me feel like, you know what, I can do this. I can go on. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, they're not here with me physically, but I feel their support. I feel their energy helping me, you know, comforting me, supporting me right here in this moment. And right now in this moment, I feel better and I can move forward, you know, and that's all any of us need at any given moment, at any given time. You know, that's what we need. We need to be able to get what we need through taking care of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. And so that's what the process of grief is for me, you know. That's what I teach clients that I work with. So again, you know, just like you, I encourage people, don't be afraid to reach out and seek help. And if you can't go to a therapist, you know, I mean, I would encourage anyone, if you have never done it before and you want to try it out, you know, if you think that you might not be able to afford it, you know, that's often not true. I know myself and a lot of other therapists work on a sliding scale. They'll work with you, you know, lots of therapists accept Medicaid plans. So there's lots of different options available for you to try it out and see. If therapy is not your jam and you don't think so, I think definitely making sure you have a supportive community, right? Like I said, loving, supportive friends or family members that you trust, that you feel you can share what's coming up for you, what you're feeling, and be vulnerable with no judgment, no bias, no, total confidentiality, and you can really get the support that you need to start feeling better, to start moving it through your life in a better way instead of being stuck in grief. Grief should not be a place where you are stuck. Grief should be a place where you come through, you accept it, you process it, and you build up the tools in your basket that you need to continue your journey, right? Because you're going to bring that grief along with you. That feeling may stay with you for the rest of your journey. So learning how to deal with grief in that way will create a much, much better feeling for you as you move through, rather than doing it the way that a lot of us have traditionally done it, myself included, which the way that a lot of us have learned in our families, which is, just kind of stuff it down and don't really talk about it. It's uncomfortable, or find some type of unhealthy coping mechanism that really, just kind of numbs the pain and doesn't really help us to learn to live with it and move with it on our journey. So, yeah.
Well, this has been an amazing episode. I have learned a lot, even though, like I said, I'm still moving through my healing process. And my sincere hope is for those who maybe they're not ready to seek therapy, that maybe this episode will change their mind, or those who are going through a grieving process, that this episode helps you in some way, shape, or form that can get you moving to that process, so you're not through that process, so you're not stuck in that process.
Yes, don't be stuck. If you're feeling stuck, reach out. No matter what it is, if you feel like you're feeling stuck, reach out. There's help out there. If anyone is interested in counseling services, definitely they can reach out to my office. I'm sure, Janay, hopefully you can share my information. My office is accepting new clients. I have a wonderful partner that I work with, and I know several other very, very good therapists. I'm happy to say Black women therapists in the Thibodeau-Houma area. We're getting more and more. So there's resources out there. There's safe spaces out there. There's people out there who can be helpful to you, that look like us, that are open to helping us and helping us to move through. So please, 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 if you feel stuck, reach out and get the support you need.
Yes, and I will have Dr. Tracy's information in the comments. If this is today's Wednesday, but of course, I think I told you it's going out on Friday. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just look in the little caption description. Her information will be there. And if it's on Facebook, it'll be in the caption as well, where you can find her information. She's a great therapist. She can help you, and if she can't, I'm pretty sure she will direct you to a place where you can get help. But most of all, we just want you to get help and get better and heal, and know that it's your journey. Don't let anyone tell you how to heal.
That's right.
What you need to do to get through that process. Dr. Tracy, I am so happy and so excited and so thankful for you coming on to this episode.
Yes.
And thankful that I found out that you are my cousin.
I know, right? Cousin. Okay, cousin. Yes. Thank you so much. And and I just want to say kudos to you. We need more people, and more Black women, more young people that are going to say, hey, I'm not afraid to say this is my experience. This helped me, and I want to share it with others. So thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for all that you do, your wisdom that you share on Journeying with Janay, your YouTube, everything that you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep sharing, because that is the healing that we need. We heal ourselves individually, and then we'll see changes in our culture, in our people, in our collective. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you again. So if you're watching on YouTube and you have not done so yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel so we get our subscribers up. And if you're watching on Facebook, make sure to follow my Journeying with Janay Facebook page so you can get all things Journeying with Janay. Thank you again, Dr. Tracy.
Thank you.
Everyone, for watching, and thank you for coming along with me as we turn pain into purpose. Bye.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.